So I just got finished reading Project Hail Mary, and it's a really good book. So we'll quickly go for a spoiler-free review, and then I'll move into spoilers. So, spoiler-free review of this book has a very similar... this is not really spoilers because it's in the first few seconds, but it's a very similar idea to The Martian, where it's a guy who's supposed to be with crewmates. He finds himself in somewhere in space, and he doesn't have crewmates, he's just on his own, and then he sort of has to deal with this. But that's kind of where the similarities to The Martian ends. It's actually quite a different book in terms of the way it deals with... sci-fi. The Martian's very grounded sci-fi, and this is a little bit more out there. Not like insane. I mean, it's not Star Trek or something, but it's a little bit further to that kind of more fantasy side of sci-fi, if that makes sense. But yeah, so that's how it sort of compares to his other book, The Martian, which I've read. I know he's got another one, Artemis. I haven't read that. But yeah, but it's the same thing in terms of The Martian, as in it has a really cool main character, very interesting. Honestly, a little bit deeper than The Martian's character, a little bit more flawed, perhaps. And yeah, really, really good. A little bit longer, but well-paced, kept me interested the whole time. Lots of cool reveals, kind of almost more mystery. Then The Martian's not really mystery, I suppose, other than that you're sort of wondering how he's going to survive. This actually has some mystery, some stuff that needs to be unraveled. A little bit more techy as well. But yeah, so the spoiler-free review, very, very good. Let's get into some spoilers now. So obviously the plot of this book is that there's these sort of microbes that are somehow like reproducing, and they're taking over. They're managing to reduce the power output of the sun because they're reproducing exponentially and basically eating all the sun's energy. And obviously this is causing some pretty massive disasters for Earth. So they assemble everyone bands together. That sort of trope, but not a bad trope. Just what often quite common in these sort of stories where everyone bands together, assemble a mission to go to this star system where they find that these microbes aren't affecting the star, and they go there to sort of figure out what they can find. And so we sort of have a bit of a dual narrative going on. We sort of have flashbacks to how our main character got there, and then we have, what he's doing in the moment. And honestly, a lot of the time when you read a book, I find if it has a dual narrative going on, even if it's a good book, you kind of find you just prefer one, and you get annoyed when it goes to the other one. As an example, you're reading Still My Archive, and you're listening to the Kaladin chapters, and then you get sent into a Shalon chapter, and you're like, no, I was liking that, or whatever. But this book, it honestly does it so seamlessly. Like, you transition back to the past, a little flashback to how he got there, and you're just kind of like, this is actually so interesting, I want to know this. But then as soon as you transition back into the present story, you're like, this is really interesting, I want to stay here. And you never really get that annoyance because they're so perfectly placed. You're like, oh my god, I'm actually really glad to get this flashback because it gives me some information that I find interesting. And then you're like, oh my god, I'm really glad to get back to it because now this flashback's naturally ended. And it also works really well because it's, you're kind of recovering... he's recovering his memories, and you're kind of discovering it at the same time as him. So you really feel like you can kind of relate to a lot to the character because he's discovering his life, and you're discovering your life as well. So that I think that works really, really well. And yeah, so honestly, I think I might upload another video, a more in-depth one on this book later on, because I think it's actually really deserves it. But yeah, I think that, the structure of a book worked seamlessly. The character is very interesting. He's a little bit deeper. He's a little bit more flawed, arguably. Like, he doesn't want to go into space and die. He's like, no, please, he has to be forced to go. But then that actually allows for some character growth, because at the end, he actually willingly sacrifices himself. Although, as it turns out, he didn't really sacrifice himself. He sort of gets the best of both worlds, but he didn't know that. So it's actually quite cool, because he was forced to make this hard decision, show his growth. But then he actually sort of, gets to live a good life at the end. So it's a very optimistic take. Everything sort of works out in the end, but not that they don't have to struggle for it. There's a lot of struggle in this book, a lot of things go wrong. And I think that's one thing I liked about The Martian, is lots of struggle, lots of things go wrong, but in the end it all sort of works out, so you kind of get left with, sort of happy thing. And then I guess I'll quickly touch on Rocky, the other sort of main character of this book, the alien. Just beautifully done, really, really cool. Obviously, there's a little bit of convenience with how simple the communication is and how well they line up. He's even got like sort of Earth-like humor, so you kind of have to look past that a little bit. But really, really well done character, really, really interesting, and I really enjoyed that optimistic end to the book as well. So yeah, thanks very much for watching.